Good evening, everybody. Welcome. See you. I still don't know why the silence is always so much more silent on Tuesday nights, but it is. Is it because we know we're only going to meditate for 8 or 10 minutes instead of an hour or something, so we're more focused? Or interesting. Such a nice silence here. Feel free to bring up anything at all for discussing. I don't have a topic tonight. Or we can sit in the silence together.
Can I ask you something about gratitude?
Sure.
There was a while there where I was having a hard time writing. I think it was mostly because she was just, a kid, so angry,
Mm-hmm.
And now I'm finding more, and I still show up now, so it's like this regular thing, and I show up and anything you have to say. And I don't know how to describe it. I wondered if you wrote with your kid, like, as you get more adult in here, and you raise your kids, I guess the idea is to bring them up. Do they want to talk to us? Or, I don't know how to describe it. I just feel like there isn't as much as saying they're not unhappy. Because most of the time, the only time they wanted to talk is when they were furious or angry. And now they're just like, oh, I'm fine.
Well, that's just.
Wonder if that's common when you, because I feel like there's less need to write to my kid, but not that I want to ignore.
Well, what you want to do, how is tearing up your scripts going?
Pretty good.
Because
In some of them, anyway. There's some.
The real reason, enough kid work is the amount of kid work that allows you to tear up your script. Because the goal of kid work, first of all, is to build enough trust that they'll let you stop doing the resistance behaviors.
Gotcha.
But eventually, if you want the script events to stop happening, you have to eliminate the lie. Kid is really based on a lie. By kid, we're really referring to aspects of humanhood that are clinging to spiritual lies, spiritual falsehoods. And in this terminology, there's spiritual adult and there's humanhood. And humanhood is the part of the consciousness that's hooked into human consciousness and believing all the material beliefs. So the kid is, and we refer to kid as those childish aspects that are entrenched in falsehoods about human life. And it turns out they're entrenched in very specific falsehoods, like I'll always be abandoned, or never be supported, or there'll never be enough, or I'll never be good enough, or something like that. And the ultimate purpose of the kid and script work together is to erase that belief. Every human being has two beliefs. I'll never be good enough, and I should do something about it. Those are the two false beliefs. And the first one's a lie, and it makes the second one a lie, of course. And the spiritual truth is that you and everything is perfect, and always has been, and everything is unfolding exactly as it should be, and it's all working And see, that's the spiritual truth. And the way you get rid of all the stuff that goes along with the belief that I'll never be good enough is to correct that belief. And that's through spiritual work, essentially. And when you know, when you have a moment of real clarity or educational variety, but when you know absolutely that everybody is always doing the very best they can and always has been, and then when you have a realization, I'm not talking about intellectual truth, but when you've had the realization that everybody is always doing the very best they can, given their own information and lack of information and ignorance, and given their goals and their understanding and their human consciousness and everything. When you really understand that, then you get it about yourself, that you've always been doing the very best you can, given your ignorance and the things you didn't know. And once you realize that, then the belief that I'll never be good enough disappears, okay? And now that kid is gone, right? And that script goes away because the kid was the belief and the belief was sustaining the script. See, the kid really is the belief. Okay. By kid, we really mean that aspect of us that is still invested in the belief that I'll never be good enough. So what you really want to do is write until the script's torn up. Write or talk, and do the steps for tearing up script. But really it becomes more a matter of daily work. When you feel the anxiety come up, you immediately question all right, what's the script, what's the belief, why am I afraid, what's the false belief? And then immediately work with yourself and list all the counterexamples that prove that it's not an always or never type thing, and bring up the spiritual truth and tell your kid the spiritual truth. And that's what we mean by raising the kid, rearing the kid. And that's what we mean by integration. We want to tear up, specifically in kid work, in script and kid work, what we're doing is tearing up those particular beliefs that have been running our lives and causing all the misery in our lives. And we all have special beliefs that are ours, that we're entrenched in. And we're trying to tear up those beliefs, replace those with the spiritual truth that, God is infinitely abundant, and God will never abandon us, and God will never reject us, and God will always include us, and God thinks we're good enough, and we are good enough. In fact, we have infinite intelligence available to us. And, the spiritual truth is contrary to all of these scripts. So, keep doing it, but it's nice that she's talking to you now instead of tearing you up.
Yes, it's not ripping me apart. It's just more like...
Yeah, well, that's a direct result of being there consistently.
Okay.
So don't give up the consistently.
Okay.
Because that's why, that's
Well, I just wondered what,
that's where the
she was gone or not. I'm like, but I know my spirits aren't completely gone, but they're definitely not near what they were.
And so she's probably pretty much come. You could talk to Ann about that a lot. A lot of experience fighting for her kids. Her kids trust her completely. So.
Mm-hmm.
All the kid work I did, actually last year, I had 3 kids. They all disappeared. And then one is back, but it's just all 3 of them. And it used to be like, they wanted a smorgasbord of stuff. Now they just want not to walk down the street. Not all these other things, and because I've done everything, all the requests. So now it's just like the little simple things. Let's walk on the treadmill, go swimming. But it used to be like 20 things in one ride.
Yeah, when they were getting nothing,
Right.
they wanted everything, so.
Sorry.
Not sure. Actually, wondering if a good question is to ask you, what would be a good question? And the other thing is, it seems to me that it's so abominably difficult to do any of the things that seem to be required to realize that I am who I am.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it seems that way.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of get that it might seem difficult to other people too.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering why that is. I mean, is that part of the, I don't know.
It's because it's very difficult, so to speak, for everybody to find out who they really are. And a lot of the reason for that is because we are so conditioned to do things, to go after it, to find out, to discover who we really are, to find out who I really am, to do the right method, to do the right technique, to, ask the right question, to do all of this stuff. We're so conditioned to do all this stuff. And that's really not the process. The process is that who you really are has never lost sight of who you really are. Okay? It's never gone away. It's never been anywhere else. It's the problem is this. There's a fog that's obscuring the sun, and we're very actively trying to figure out how to light a new sun and get it up in the sky and such like, instead of waiting for the fog to clear. And the process is not one of figuring out anything at all, or of learning anything that we don't know right now, or of developing any techniques or anything at all. The process is one of eliminating that which you aren't. And it helps to have teachers or some guides so that you get a start on that process. But in the East they call it neti neti, not this, not this. I'm sure you've heard that before. We're so identified, the human mind, the human consciousness is identified with things, and our minds are identified with labeling things and defining things. And to characterize something limits it, of course. The minute I say something's red, I've restricted it from all the other colors. And, to characterize God restricts God immediately. If I say God is love, then I put a limit on God to whatever I think God love is. In any event, to characterize is limiting, but it's our nature as human beings, so to speak, to label things. And it's the structure of our language to label things. And in order to identify something, we have to separate it from the other things. So even the very nature of our language is contrary to realization. It's confirming the separateness and the dualism, the individualities. The way to get closer to knowing who you are is not to figure it out or to attack anything or do anything. It's to withdraw your energy from all these things that are obscuring who you are. We can't, all the things that I'm invested in, are tying me to the identification with this body-mind thing. Everything that I'm afraid of, or love, or hate, or fear, or desire, every outcome that I think I know how it should be, or every outcome that I have that I want, or everything that I don't want, or every concept I have about things, or every opinion I have, all these things are tying me to the problem. So it is obviously very difficult. And wanting to change it ties me to the problem, and wanting to get rid of it ties me to the problem, and wanting to become enlightened hinders me. Okay? So it is it's an unwalkable path. Not a path, It's like when you tell me what path you took to get from who you originally were to where you are now, then I will be glad to point out to you the way back. But nobody has any idea how they got to where they are, or how they got here from yesterday, let alone from before we were born. So it would appear to be insurmountable. And yet, that is the nature of this Leelaa, is that we grow spiritually. And we unconsciously grow it by discovering all the stuff that doesn't work as God. We try to find power in everything that isn't God and cross them off one by one for a long time. And eventually we become consciously on the path. And all the books give you glimpses. All the talks give you glimpses. It's the old finger pointing at the moon thing, where the Zen master's pointing to the moon and everybody's studying the hand. And they're trying to figure out whether it needs to be a 3-fingered hand or a 4-fingered hand or a 5-fingered hand, and should the thumb be inside or outside, and you point with this finger or this finger, and left-handed or right-handed, and they're studying the hand and they're all pointing and trying to get enlightened by pointing, and they're doing this, and if they ever glanced up and saw the moon, they'd say, oh, and it would be clear and it would be done, okay? But they're all making a religion of pointing because nobody looked up. So it's that kind of a thing. And nonetheless, from being with that Zen master, you do get the fact that he's pointing at something. And you get the fact that your sense of reality isn't complete. Because the Zen master is pointing to something and his life's working better than yours. So that's what that's all about. And different people at different times explain things better. But the quickest way, of course, is to hang out with somebody who has the consciousness, because just being in the consciousness lifts you. Going to a satsang, like the Robert Adams satsang, is the quickest route. With no attempt to figure out anything. Going there as a devotee, with no questions and no answers, and not trying to gain any intellectual understanding or anything at all. Being in the presence lifts you. And that's the shortest route. But listening to Robert's CDs is good. Listening to Joel tapes is good. Being in the consciousness as much as you can is as much as you can do, really. And withdraw your energy from the false identification with the mind. And again, you can't stop your mind. Bhagwan used to laugh and say, how will I stop my mind? With my mind? And he just burst into laughter and cackle at us all for trying to stop our minds, you know. But you can develop the skill of not paying any attention to your mind. And if you don't pay any attention to your mind, it'll run down. It just runs down. That's you don't stop your mind, you let it run down by not giving it any energy, because the only thing that sustains your mind is the energy you give it by applauding it or being afraid of it or listening to it or trying to shut it up or whatever, you know. So the process is to stop. I tell people, you know, I was with Robert 3 times a week for like 7 years or 8 years. And I don't think I ever asked him a question. You know, all that time, I don't think there was ever a question that I wanted to ask him. It was just being with him, you know. I was just there to be there, and I just sat there, and when he and I were alone on private time, we just sit on a bench in the sun, and watch the people play soccer or whatever they were doing, you know, and there was no need to ask any questions at all. Rashneesh pointed out to me that every time I asked a question and he answered it, my mind immediately generated 10 more questions based on that answer. So he laughed about the fact that asking questions and getting answers was in fact counterproductive. And his statement was that I'm not here to answer your questions, I'm here to bring you to the place where you don't have to ask them. And he did that for me. Rajneesh raised me to the point where I could see the hopelessness of asking questions, but also, as long as you have questions, they need to be asked. So there is that side of it too. Because the mind will clamor if it's not.
Well, my question is, because I'm there, when the idea of following the I thought after asking the question, to whom does the thought come? Comes to me, who am I? And then I don't understand, but I've heard that that's following you. It seems what you're saying, taking the attention away from the thought itself, and then trying to get to God somehow. And I'm just maybe trying to verify that or questioning exactly what that is, following the idea.
The problem is that, you know, who does this question come to? It comes to me, okay? Now that I is the personal sense, okay? So then the question is, well, who is this I? You know, all right, raise your hand. Somebody is claiming, somebody called a little personalized, claiming to have existence, okay? And the question, let's address that, is the question, is well, who is this I? Where does this I come from? But what he's really talking about is, he says frequently, the question really is, what is the source of this I? What is the source of this personal I? Where did this I come from? Is what he's really asking for. And he's very firm about the fact that you don't answer that question, you just ask that question. And it turns out that if you ask the one that says me, I thought that thought, well, who are you? Where did you come from? There won't be an answer. There will be silence, you see? And that silence is the answer. So he's directing you to the source and directing you away from the personal sense, because just the silence itself is the source. So what we're doing is observing that there is no such entity as personal I. That is just an illusion, it's just a thought. And it in fact is just a thought. And so when there's not a thought, there can't be a personal I. You know, if you're listening, you're not thinking, and therefore nobody can answer the question, and therefore there is no personal I at that point. So you're in the silence. So that's what that's all about. He talks about following the thread and stuff like that, and that never clicked with me. But just saying I to yourself, just quietly saying I will also move you, because that I very quickly goes from this personal sense to a universal sense. The I is the answer, but it's the wrong I. The sense I am, without anything tacked onto it, it is the point to get. It is a point to get to along the way, but it's a very important point to realize that the I am that I am is the universal one, not the individual one.
Does that tie into Jesus Christ's statement, I am who am?
I am that I am. Yeah. See, they always translate that as I am that I am. And people say that's so funny, I am that I am. And they don't know. What Moses and Jesus' revelation is, oh, I am that I am. I'm the I am. I'm that I am. I'm not this one. I'm that I am. Is the way I understand that statement. That's the only way that makes sense to me. If you're looking at your personal sense, and if you're following the I thread or saying I to yourself and saying I to yourself, and all of a sudden it opens up and you're in this big sense, then and then you have a realization that I'm that I am, I'm this I am, I'm that I am, the I am. Then that's the truth, and that's the understanding, and that's the revelation that makes sense to me. It's the same as I and my Father are one.
Right, that's what Jesus said.
But he did echo Moses, who said, I am that I am.
Yeah, that's Old Testament.
He says, I and my Father are one. He says, you see me, you see my Father. You know, and all those things are saying the same thing. You know, there's just one here. You know, and it's that one. It's that I am. It's not this I am. So the only error is that we've got the I am too localized.
There is no individual, there's only one.
Mm-hmm.
We are all one.
Mm-hmm. One consciousness, God consciousness, expressed individually, individualized, but not to be identified with the body-mind. But God is infinitely, the God which is consciousness is infinitely expressed, infinitely expressive. And it's expressed as all of this, but so it would be fine to say that God is me, but to say I am God might be a mistake, because when I say I am God, I might have the wrong I. But God is me is true. God is expressed as Lee is the truth. If Lee thinks he's God, he's wrong. The truth is that God expressed as Lee is God. Okay? So you got to be careful about your eyes there as well.
Do we each have a purpose? Is there a purpose?
Well, Robert would say no. Robert would say that it's all a Leelaa of the play. If there's not really an each, then there's not really a purpose in the sense that we talk about purpose.
But if we're all an expression of God,
Mm-hmm. We can talk about God expressing itself in the infinite variety of forms that it expresses itself for whatever reason it's doing so, but I make no claim to know what those reasons are, or why God is playing the game God is playing, or why this expression is here. But the purpose is at that end, not this end. For Lee to have a purpose is back to the assumption that there's a Lee.
Or we go back to a cause. If there's a purpose, there's a cause.
Mm-hmm. So God, they used to use the term Leelaa to play, and that's exactly what they mean. You know, this infinitely complex, complicated, interrelated, perfectly connected play of God, expressing itself as all of this. For talking about reason and purpose is, the words don't have any meaning when you're talking about at that level of game. Even outside time and space, then the questions break down. It is all you can say about it. It is.
The whole thing with the questions and the not asking questions or the asking questions is the answer is always the same.
Mm-hmm.
So after a while, it just gets like pointless to even ask questions because you already know what the answer is.
Yeah.
So,
well, each time Robert was asked a question, there was a different answer because as Robert was often asked the same question by 2 or 3 different people in one satsang and gave 2 or 3 different answers. So the answer is generally at the level of the question. So there is some intellectual nurturing happening at that level for the people, at whatever level they're at. But, the answer is silence, the ultimate answer. The questions get different answers to the extent that they're less than the ultimate question. But there comes a point where when questioning stops and sitting in the silence is the only source.
Are dogs and cats and all other creatures that I am also?
Everything that is consciousness. So Sam's not having any trouble finding the bliss.
%98 of the world has a question. And there's only a couple guys that, if they even exist, there's only a couple men and women that know that there is no answer, truly know there's no answer to their question. So, if that makes sense. So, it seems like the whole point of sessions like this is the Leelaa.
There's a point.
Well, not the point, but the reason that, because, I'm a social insect. It's like a lot of the principles I hear everywhere are all the same.
Mm-hmm.
So, when someone in India is asking a question to their guru over there, that's just part of the interaction of the God consciousness as an individual.
Mm-hmm. Sure. The game appears to be that we're all growing spiritually. God as these individual things, the game appears that God expresses itself individually, ignorantly, asleep. And the process is becoming awake again, you know. And but that's putting a storyline on the Leelaa, you know, which may or may not have anything to do with the Leelaa in fact, but that's putting a storyline on it. And in that sense, you know, coming together in a situation like this, we're sharing consciousness that we wouldn't be sharing if we were apart. And so this is perhaps beneficial to the process of becoming awake. And that's the reason we're going to satsang, to sit with the, you know, to go to a satsang like with Robert or Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta or somebody, is to be with that high consciousness, you know.
Well, see, that takes me to, I saw this messed up movie.
See, an answer gets another 10 questions.
I had to bring up something so that I could ask. I watched this movie called Requiem for a Dream. And it's about these people that go insane. And so I went insane. And then I grew spiritually just to find out that I'm insane. So, and the insanity is just that I think that I can do something about it, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So, because you know, there's all these different religions, and there's like, they always say in the Eastern, like they always say that, well, being in the West, we're all conditioned for this stuff, and in the East, they're not. But the consciousness, can't it be in all the churches? I mean, when we strip the religion away, and, you know, this guy with the big belly sitting on it, whatever, this guy hanging on a cross, or this lady with all these arms, when you take all that away, it's the principles is still the consciousness is still there. So what's the difference between one hemisphere and the other?
Well, there's no difference. I mean, you know, the consciousness that counts is not the consciousness of the church or something like that. It's the consciousness of the individual. You know, I mean, the consciousness is passed on individual to individual. So that's why one Christian church is really high and one Christian church is really low, because of the consciousness of the pastor, of the person about whom the church sprung up. There's a much longer tradition of right thinking in India than there is in this country. So there's a lot more, and the consciousness has been passed on there a lot more, and there are a lot more people who have the consciousness over there. Although that certainly is shifting now.
I heard on a Joel tape one time, what I think I heard was that it only would take one person with the consciousness, the correct consciousness, to change the world.
Well, I mean,
something along those lines.
Certainly Jesus changed the world. Certainly Buddha changed the world. Certainly Lao Tzu changed the world. Certainly Shankara changed the world. Certainly Krishna changed the world. And there have been a few incredible consciousnesses that had so much light that the world changed. Because here we are 2,000 years later, still feeling the effect of the light called Jesus, or 2,500 years later, of the light called Buddha. So certainly a consciousness changes the world, but the the relative level of happiness and misery between now and 2,000 and 3,000 years ago is not significantly different. So it changed the world in the sense of making a big mark, but it didn't change the world in the sense of the fact that everybody still has to do their own individual growth. The truth was known 5,000 years ago. The Vedantas and the Upanishads were written 5,000 years ago, and they're just as clear as a bell. So the truth's been known for a long, long time and passed on. But Robert would say that this is a third grade world. And the nature of this world is for people to work out, sort out their stuff, work on their problems, and deal with their scripts, and grow spiritually, and do all this stuff, and the people that pass the stuff on this world come back at another world. And the people that were worse screwed up than we are come back at this world, So, this is a third grade world. The class keeps turning over, but it stays third grade, The props get more sophisticated, but,
And that was what I was saying is, in this movie, and I'll just relate it to myself, because, I had a little fire engine with a screaming ring bell. Next thing you know, I'm on drugs. And then, now I'm not. And so, if there is such thing as another life and we come back and reincarnation, then I guess it doesn't matter. But I come back and do drugs again, and then but just not as long. I have one day left, so.
Or you might not have to do that again.
Right, and then with the consciousness, there's one consciousness, but that's what messes me up, because there seems to be more than one consciousness in context, in different contexts. They have the national consciousness, then they have the consciousness of this, compared to the consciousness of that, compared to the consciousness of that. The consciousness of this church only goes as high as the leader.
Yeah, but those are all aspects of the one consciousness. Now, we said the one consciousness has expressed itself as all these different consciousnesses, and he starts all these individual consciousnesses out in complete ignorance. And you're discussing the fact that lots of aspects of this consciousness are still pretty ignorant.
Well, that fits.
Most of the prodigal sons are still on their way out.
Right.
They're still spending it. They haven't found the pig pen yet. They haven't even started back. So, and that's the long path is the way out and the way back. So, there's human consciousness is potentially infinitely ignorant. But the game seems to be that it all starts out ignorant. Everything starts ignorant. Oak trees start out as acorns. And you can see how human consciousness as a pool started out really ignorant. With very simplistic ideas of God. God was everything that couldn't be explained, and power gods and thunder gods and fruit gods, and and what has happened is that the human consciousness has become more sophisticated. We can see over the 50,000 years that we've been around, or specifically over the 5,000 years that we've been keeping track of it. The human consciousness is getting more sophisticated, but all of human consciousness started asleep and is becoming awake. There are now a lot of high people wandering around this world. There are a lot of really particular people on this earth right now. And there used to be the occasional one. So human consciousness is becoming awake. And individuals are becoming awake, sometimes quicker, sometimes slower.
Can I ask somebody said about India? You're saying that there's just a higher consciousness there, there's one here. Why is that? How you out picture your consciousness? I'm talking in circles, sorry. I try to formulate with that. They say when your consciousness gets higher, stuff that I'm reading about Joel in the outside will automatically change.
Uh-huh.
And there's just so much death and poverty. And not that I want to judge it by those things, but, it just seems like there's a lot of misery in India.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So why is that also the same place for the higher consciousness?
Ask God.
I think
No, I just can't find it.
It's politics. The church, like the church that Jesus started, is not the church
Yeah,
on the
that's true.
street.
That's very true.
There's politics in it. And we're a very political country, and so that smothers any spiritual principle we can go by. Because we're going on principles of, am I going to offend somebody?
They're hungry. They're so,
I went to Tibet.
they're so spiritual that they got no science, so they can't produce food, but they can't control birth. Now, how's that for a source of poverty? You know?
Well, I spent a couple of days in China a couple of years ago, and part of the tour we spent a couple of days in Tibet.
Yeah.
And when you went there was such a peaceful, beautiful feeling when I went to the palace, Volcano Palace, and then we went to a monastery. But then you were in the city, and it was just so sad, the amount of poverty. Like, it was worse than anything I'd ever seen. You got out of your car and you were mauled by children.
India is really terrible.
Yeah.
I mean, India smells terrible. I mean, and open sewage on the sides of roads, everywhere. You know, I mean, and there's some very high people there.
Yeah. I mean, I was torn because I didn't want to judge everything by my, limited ability to see, what's it?
Picture.
Yeah, by my picture. But at the same time, I was like, I just felt such, I don't know, something, I was half filled with spiritual, on the other side, I just felt like, it just depressed me beyond belief. I'd never seen such poor living conditions in my life. It was hard, so.
Yeah, you can draw whatever conclusions you want.
Yeah, I just wondered.
Maybe it's a manifestation of your own consciousness.
Yeah. You mean like I was doing what I expected, or what do you mean? Or the people are? I mean, it was just, a lot of alcoholism, a lot of smoking, a lot of, not that there isn't that here. It's just, I just had never seen anything. I mean, I've been to I did a lot of traveling, and Tibet was easily the worst I'd ever seen.
No,
And I haven't been to India.
we live better here. There's no question about that.
Yeah.
The average level of poverty here is a hell of a lot better than the average level of poverty in India. There's just no doubt about that.
But it's also, the way I see things is on the ability, on whatever the consciousness that I've achieved in this life. So compared to 2 years ago, I'm looking at people differently. And so you might go back after all this work you've done and gone, oh, that's just God expressing itself as a goat rather than,
Maybe.
What did you have to?
When I first spoke with you, I took something away that had to do with bringing, I don't know, remember the words, bringing meditation or the practice or the meditation or the practice, something along those lines, to trying to wake up in the midst of the marketplace. And my job, I work in a classroom with adults, and I pretty much take breaks when I want to, or when they need to. And so when they go out, I usually have a timer, and I'll set for 3 minutes and try to meditate during that time, because the marketplace is empty. When I'm in the midst of my job, no matter how simple it may be, it's like sometimes it'll occur to me, I guess by grace, that you haven't really done self-inquiry or meditation. And because I guess my former disciplines had to do with having something observe physical motions, I start with who thinks he's getting up to file something. And then I don't even start with anything. I just go, to whom does this thought come? And then I try to go into it. But then it fades very quickly. A student will need something, or the phone will ring. And then the only other time that seems to be good is when I'm walking up the hallway. It's a secure area. I have to escort, and who's walking up the hallway? I used to be just God with every footstep, but it was again it was between the marketplaces, not in the midst of, and it seems very, very difficult for me to be in the midst and have the grace, which I know I have no control over, to come to the reality, or attempt to be who I am. So I just throwing that out because it's like another cry for help.
Well, yeah, that's just a measure of how deeply we're believing that we're the body-mind. As long as you think you're the body-mind, that's going to leave us pretty entrenched. And so that's why we have to start out doing it, not in the marketplace. My friend Jay talks about, doing stupid God tricks to remind yourself. What he means is, and Joel suggests this actually a couple places too, every time you train yourself, train the robot to every time it walks through a door, meditate for 10 seconds. Or every time you get in your car, meditate or take a 5-second pause before you pick up the phone. Or train the robot to pause for 5 or 10 seconds and remember who you are, as triggered by certain events that happen during your day. And that sort of thing can start to have an effect on you. But, the whole thing is about when you get caught up in it, Being in the world but not of it really means that there is a part of you that's always in prayer. Or meditation, or whatever you want to call it, it's centered. Joel achieved that. Joel was always in the consciousness and watching the body. Joel was always aware of the presence of God and was watching his body doing what it was supposed to do. Robert wasn't even there. Robert was so amazing that wasn't even his body. Robert couldn't be in the marketplace. There was no marketplace. The body was doing whatever it was doing. He didn't even think it was his body, and he had a very brief association with the body. He could care less what it was doing. But that's the drill, and the fact is that it's blue-collar work. Except periodically there's a God shot, a moment of clarity, or an aha, or something like that happens periodically. There jolts upwards, but those are brought about by blue-collar work. You meditate 10 minutes every morning with no effect for 6 months, and it doesn't do anything, and then you have an aha, and then you meditate for 6 months, and people never attribute the aha to the 6 months of meditation with no effect. But without the 6 months, the aha wouldn't happen, see, because something's cooking down there, the molasses is thinning out to where you can have the ahas coming through and stuff. So, and a lot of it's blue-collar work. And hanging out in the highest consciousness you can find. If you can find a Robert, hang out with him, Getting lifted. Hanging out in high communities and people who are high. You can get lifted, and you can do blue-collar work.
Was Robert doing any spiritual work, so to speak, before he was enlightened? I remember hearing in the tape that it was like at a young age, 14 or something.
Not in this lifetime, but he would be the first to tell you that he undoubtedly had, in previous lifetimes, essentially accomplished. He was obviously essentially self-realized in the previous lifetime, maybe for a lot of them. He did not start from scratch this lifetime. It's like Mozart. Mozart came in and was writing symphonies at the age of 5. I mean, this guy did not start from scratch, Let's face it. Robert didn't start from scratch.
Well, when we say be with people in a community of higher consciousness, is too far north. And I'm sure there's a community around here somewhere, but one of the problems that I've had, if there even is a problem, is trying to be in a community of people at a higher level of consciousness. These Tuesday nights I come to all the time because this is a higher level of consciousness. This is probably the highest level of consciousness I get, is the sessions here in this form. There's not like any, when I went to this church out, off the 90 and stuff, and then my church, I was thinking of going back to my church where I got in all that trouble, but I'm a different, I am now, I am that I am, at certain times, so I think I can go back there and not be not wait out as much, so that's going to be my attempt.
Make sure that consciousness is higher than yours.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it works, hanging out with higher, that's why AA works. Because there's a higher drinking consciousness in an AA meeting than outside of it, so people that go to AA regularly get their consciousness reinformed on a regular basis that there's no reason for them to drink today. So it does work. And you can also trust the process that you are being presented with whatever it is you need at the next level. And when you need a higher group than this, you will find it. It will show up.
Right.
You don't even need to go looking for it. You don't need to make it happen. It will appear. Thanks for coming.
Yeah, they do.